Welcome to the Cabin Culture Podcast, where we spend a little more time diving deeper into all the fun parts of cabin culture. We like to think of this as both the material and imagined expressions of how cabin lovers, dwellers, builders, and designers wish to live a more simple and authentic life. On this episode, we're talking with Whitney Bradberry, owner and host of the Front Range AFrame in Bailey, Colorado. Whitney and her husband renovated this AFrame down to the studs by themselves during the pandemic and have been hosting guests there ever since. Whitney and I cover everything from how they found their AFrame, the cost of the renovation, their favorite cabin drinks, the importance of being good neighbors, and a little bit of everything in between. Thanks so much for joining us, and here we go. Hey there!
Hi! Yay!
We're making it happen.
Doing it. I'm so excited.
I'm excited to chat. Are you from Colorado originally?
I am from Florida.
Wow. Okay. What brought you to Colorado, which seems like the hub of cabin culture?
Right? When I was, I've been out here for over 15 years. I moved out here and finished school, but when I was a kid, my dad would take us skiing from Florida, usually to North Carolina, fell in love with the mountains, and then I don't know how we would come out to Colorado every once in a while, and yeah, I decided to move west once I was in my kind of finishing school and trying to figure out what was next for me, and it was the greatest decision ever, and I can't even ever imagine myself leaving Colorado, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a sign of a good choice. Where did you go skiing in North Carolina?
We always went to Sugar Mountain.
Yes.
And stayed in the octagon cabins that were right on the side.
Yep.
And just, yeah, I mean, forever cabins have always been a part of my life, I feel like. So
yeah. And for those who don't know the mountains of North Carolina, it's fascinating because I grew up in Pennsylvania and skied in New England. But when I moved down to North Carolina, especially after I bought the cabin in Boone, I very quickly learned that this is the southernmost place to go skiing. And so you get a lot of folks from Florida, South Carolina,
yes.
Georgia, because there's nowhere else to go skiing. And so that's where everyone goes.
That's right. Yes.
When did you buy your AFrame? And you renovated, you did not build. So take us back to when you first bought that.
We bought the AFrame in 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic. I don't know that we were necessarily looking, but when we bought it, I saw it and I sent it to my husband and he was like, "Yeah, we could go look at that." My realtor was like, "Hi, you have to go right now. They're already getting offers on this thing." So my husband Andrew was at work and I had to like FaceTime him and be like, "Hi, we have to buy this place and I know that you haven't seen it, but please trust me." And so he apparently trusted me and we ended up putting an offer in and getting the A-frame, and then we were like, "Oh, well, it'll be like a couple months. We'll renovate the kitchen that really needs it." And we gutted like everything, and Andrew's talented. He renovated the whole place and we had some help from friends, and I just kind of had the vision, and we just did it. So it took us like 6 months to renovate the A-frame and then got it kind of live after that and started hosting.
It's got to be pretty close to your house if you saw it that day and had to go see it immediately. How far is it from your primary home?
It's just like 35 minutes from here, so not too far, which I cannot understand how anyone does hosting from farther than that. I feel like I'm up there just all the time for something. And even with a good community up there, I'm still like up there way too much, it feels like.
This is what Natalie said in one of our very first episodes. She hosts remotely, and she said, I actually recommend that everyone who starts hosting does their first one remote, because what it forces you to do, you can't be up there all the time. You have to learn how to like outsource and manage, which I think could be a great thing. But also I think your first time, it's really nice to be able to be hands-on and be there to make a lot of small changes all the time as you're learning what guests like, what you need to improve.
Yeah, that totally makes sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so you guys did the renovation yourself. I want to talk about how you created an initial budget for this, because I feel like renovations, as hard as it is to answer build cost, I
Hmm.
think it's almost harder to answer renovation costs because there's so much you don't know going in. Did you have an initial budget when you bought it? Talk me through your financial model. When you bought it, did you know you were going to rent it and this was part of the equation? Did it was just going to be a second place for you? What were the goals and then how did you make those numbers work?
Well, first of all, that is like the thing I'm very bad at is budgets. So I can't, I'm maybe not the best person to talk about this, but we knew it was going to be an Airbnb. My goal was always to make it different than any Airbnb I had been in, which at the time I had not been in very nice Airbnbs. And I was like, why every time do I go to an Airbnb and I get like, I'm like, it's okay, but there's nothing about it that really stands out. And I just, now it doesn't feel that exciting. But at the time, I really had this vision to make it so you walk in the A-frame and it's different than like your normal experience and you feel like the host had you in mind. And so that was the vision all along. And then for the budget, I think we had, I mean, up front, I wrote down how much we spent 30 to 40K on the remodel. I think we thought it was going to be around 20 to 30, and we went above that.
Wait, you did a whole gut remodel. Okay, I know you did a lot of
Yes.
the work yourself. That makes a difference, but that still feels incredible considering that you fully gutted it.
I mean, I think that's the advantage of having doing it ourselves is that you can just we could splurge on things that we wanted, like the cedar hot tub or cute tile, and not worry about costs as much because Andrew was doing the work. So yeah, I mean that's the benefit. It's time consuming. It probably almost killed Andrew because he's a paramedic and he would work his
Mm.
48-hour shift and then go from there and do 96 hours of renovating this cabin and then go back to work. So it was like 6 months of I don't know that I could convince him to do that again, but it was yeah, I mean, doing it yourself definitely pays off in that regards is that it's cheaper.
Yeah.
So,
And you did all the design visionary stuff. How did that collaboration work with the two of you? I'm really interested. So many cabins are done by couples.
mhm.
And often, this is a really interesting like gender dynamic, but often what we see is the women are doing the design, the visionary, the hosting, and the men are often doing the building. Obviously,
Yes.
this is assuming like hetero relationships. That's not the case in all places, but from a lot of the folks that we've interviewed, that's what we've seen. How did that dynamic work with the two of you?
So this was our we had purchased our first home only a few years ago before we bought the A-frame, and it was a this house that I'm in, it was a full gut also, like smelled like a lot of cats had lived in here, lots of wood paneling. And so we got to play with how this was going to work for this and we realized, hey, we're kind of good at this. Like we both get along, we both have good ideas. Andrew is pretty open to whatever I suggest and he will tell me if he thinks it's crazy. If he thinks it's a trend that's going to go out in 5 days and I'm going to get sick of it, he'll just let me know. And I'm like, okay, let's work through some other options. But together we work really well. I think we're both pretty laid back about things. Um, there's no fighting over paint colors. It's just like, it just works. We're good at it. I mean, I don't know. I think we have a skill there where we can just like work together and it works and he trusts me and I trust him and we just do it. And so yeah,
Okay,
our
what do
first
you
shot
fight about though? Tell me there's something to make me feel better.
I mean, we definitely fight, but not about
Not about house stuff?
renovations. Not really.
Oh.
We disagree sometimes, and I wouldn't say it ever gets to a fight. We disagree about how to handle a difficult host or guest occasionally.
Oh, yep.
He's a lot more strict than me about how to handle something, whereas I'm like, how do we sort this out? And I'm the one generally answering people, but that's probably where we have more disagreements when it comes to hosting than anything else. So,
I think that happens a lot when you're not the one corresponding with the guest, because that is the exact same dynamic that Sean and I have. And I think in theory, it's easy to hold a hard line and think about the bottom line in business when you don't have to work with the human. But when you're the one building those relationships and then having to like salvage them when things are hard, It's harder
Yes.
to just focus on the bottom line. And it sounds
For
a
sure.
lot like you care about experience. That impacts experience.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So you've done two of these already. This brings me to an interesting question that you actually mentioned. For those who don't know, I send out a pre interview form so I can get to know folks a little bit ahead of time. And you mentioned something that has been heavy on my mind recently. So I'm actually really eager to like jump into this a little bit, which is the pressure that I feel somewhat internally, but somewhat from Instagram to once you do it once to do it again and continue to grow and scale. And it sounds like you did that with your house and you were like, hey, we're pretty good at this. Maybe we can do it with a cabin. Do you have
Mhm.
another project in mind? Do you feel that desire? What happens next?
I always feel that desire, but I don't actually know. I have, we haven't followed through with that. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. One being that it's just so much work. And I think we now have a more realistic idea of what kind of work we're looking at when we talk about doing that. And then the other thing is the location that we chose with the A-frame was dead. It was hard to find AirDNA information on how successful we would be, and now it is so, I want to say oversaturated, but it's much more popular. It's one of the closest places to Denver and the Front Range of Denver area that you can still have a short-term rental. So I don't know that we want to continue to contribute to adding more short-term rentals to that area. And if we look beyond that, then we're looking at hosting in a location where if we're going to renovate it, that's Andrew has to figure out how to get there on his time
Yeah.
off, and it
Yeah.
can't be too far away. And we would likely, if we weren't building, which I don't think we're in a place to do, be renovating something. So there's just a lot of barriers to us doing it again, some that I've put on myself and some
Hmm.
that I just think we have to consider before we make that decision. But you're right, that's a huge pressure. And of course, like it's fun. It's fun renovating something and making it your own. And I would love to do that again, but it would really have to be the right property. And I just haven't seen it. And I do look all the time.
Yeah. I know it's hard to stop looking because for a period of time when you decide that you're going to do it, you're looking everywhere. Then you're still
Hmm.
getting the alerts. I can't quite figure out where the pressure is coming from on my end. And I'm seeing it in other places, so I know I'm not alone. If it's internal, just like we really enjoyed the process and it was a
Right.
creative dream to bring something to life, is that it? Is it financial? People do it and realize, like, oh, I can make some money off this. It's a good way to build long term wealth. It's a good way to potentially make a little bit of money now. Or if it's the hosting, right? Because plenty of people pursue whole careers in the hospitality industry because they genuinely like the experience
Yeah.
of hosting. Or this fourth bucket, and I'm sure I'm missing some of the external pressure on social media. The amount of times we get asked, are you building again? Where are you building? What are you doing? Or the need to like keep up with content and like and all of that like pressure. Where do you think for a lot of folks, because we do see a lot of cabins, you have one successful one, and then all of a sudden, I'm buying a new piece of land. It's three, it's four, it's five.
Right. I mean, that sums it up perfectly on what I think the where the pressure's coming from. And I don't know what it is for other people. All I can say is for myself, I like having a creative outlet. So the process of renovating is something that really gives me an that outlet to do something that's a little different than my everyday job, which is marketing for nonprofits, and is something so different that I would love to do that again. But then but of course, income plays a role in that. I think it, you do make money doing this, and not probably me less because I'm constantly updating the A-frame and being inefficient. But you
I
do,
can relate.
you do like that's another advantage. It's like, oh, this could be a thing that could help us set goals towards our future and maybe retire earlier or do some of the things we hope we can do down the road. And so that is another pressure also that I think Andrew and I
Yeah.
talk about. So that
Yeah.
that to me is, but I don't know. I mean, also social media, you see like another cabin pop up and you're like, I want to do that. That's so cool. So
Yeah. Yeah. I will be totally honest. I don't know if I should say this publicly, but Recently, I've started muting almost all the cabin accounts that I follow because I find we've been undergoing a big debate in our house of we have a long-term rental and a short-term rental in Boone, and I'm starting to feel weird about owning multiple short-term rentals amidst housing concerns in places.
Hmm.
And we were debating, do we sell those two and build another cabin? So we're still like minimizing our impact, or do we sell those two and just pay off our mortgage, which still helps us financially, but
Right.
isn't quite as flashy or fun, right? And so in that process, I've been thinking a lot anyway about like what we do. And the more that I see cabin content, the more that it makes me feel like, oh, we should build another one. Oh, like we could add this. Oh, we could do this. And it just feels like it's feeding an unhealthy lack of contentment
Hmm.
rather than just saying, like, actually, we built our dream cabin and our family camp we co own with my sister, and that's enough. That's it.
Right.
That's enough. And I just think in our country, it's hard to reach that place. And when I spend time on Instagram
Yes.
and you keep seeing them, it feeds that. I wonder if that's part of it. Do you feel like it's up to individuals to seek this contentment and slow the growth? Or is this something that it's up to cities and states and maybe even the country to regulate?
A good question. And I guess probably no matter, I suppose I think it's both. I really think that the individual needs to reflect, especially in these communities where there is a ton of short-term rentals. Why are you doing it? What, just like being a good neighbor to your neighbor that you live next to, do you plan on being a good neighbor? Do you plan to be part of the community? What value do you bring to that community? I think those are questions that hosts should be asking a lot more than just buy another house, make more money, do this. Like there's just so much more to it when you actually think about it. And so I understand why regulations are happening, and I think some of them are crazy, some of them make sense to me, but really I wish that us as hosts, we would take more time to think about our impact and how we can improve the community that we're building in or renovating in or just living in. Like those, that's important to me. So that's something that really I feel very strongly about, is to make sure that
Yeah.
I'm a good community member where we're at. So
Yeah, and it feels hard speaking as someone with multiple rental properties. It feels really hard to do that in multiple places. And
yes.
for us, the multiple places is like we've always picked places that we love and we want to spend time. So this is like a way for us to do it and share that love with other people. We feel like we know these communities, so we can really promote local businesses. And I find it's really hard to be as engaged in all of them. I feel very engaged in Freeport. I feel somewhat engaged in Dover, Foxcroft, and Northern Maine, but I've like removed myself so much from Boone since those two because I just don't have the bandwidth to do all of it.
Right.
So it feels like as folks scale, it is much harder. If you ask that question, can I be a good neighbor? I might intend to, but can I realistically do it the way that I want in multiple places?
Yeah, and I guess that's a question that since I'm not in that, I don't know what the answer is, but I feel
Yeah.
like I think that's where I have some concerns about scaling and what is appropriate. We've brought on a co-host for times when I need a break or I'm going on vacation, somebody else needs to respond and is close by, and she's part of the community. And I feel good about having, even when I can't be part of the community or can't be part of playing a role, I want other people to be able to do that for me. So even with like property managers and co-hosts and things like that, I think there's still ways to be involved in that community maybe that aren't always just like on us to be that person. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
don't
and
know.
I feel like every community is so different. That's where I feel like regulations on a city level could be really helpful because I do think buying land in the middle of nowhere and building something there feels different than renting out an entire floor of apartments and then using arbitrage to like rent all of them on Airbnb where people can't
Right.
live. That feels different. So like New York City has a need for different regulations than perhaps Dover, Foxcroft, Maine. And I guess I feel some sort of way about finger pointing at people within this. Like everyone's operating fairly within a system that allows it, doing what's best for them
Hmm.
and their family. So to ask them to not do that out of the grid, it's kind of like climate change. I feel I was vegan for a really long time because of the environmental impact. And I never felt okay guilting other people about that or being like, you need to go vegan. This is a much bigger problem. And your meat eating is not causing it in the same way that like big
Yes.
industry is. And the government really has to step in and look out for us. That's the role of government, is to see where there are problems and how they can help prevent it versus, anyway, this is getting political, but it just feels bad. I like finger pointing at people when everyone's just trying to do what brings them joy, what they think does good for the world and supports their family.
Yeah, I agree. And I guess me saying that I think it's on the host definitely finger points a little bit. And but
I didn't
but
mean
what
that. I totally didn't feel that
no,
way at
but
all. I thought that was
I think I mean, but I'm willing to own that also. So
because I've done a lot of that. I mean, I talk about it a decent amount on Instagram and think about it all the time. And I definitely finger point at people who are like, who have like Instagram accounts that are like, here's how you can become a millionaire in the next 6 months by like, take these 3 steps. Here's how you can avoid taxes so that you don't have to like pay anything back.
right.
Those feel really like bad to me. But at the same time, they're doing it legally within the system that allows it. And I'm finger pointing. So it does get really tricky. But it's
Totally.
just been on my mind so much, and you mentioned that in your pre-interview form, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I've been so hungry to think about this with someone else."
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, but you mentioned that you have a career in marketing, which I think is really interesting because I found you on Instagram. So obviously, you have when you knew you were going to rent your cabin right away, as someone who does marketing full time, you had to have thought about like, what is my marketing plan for this cabin? Can you talk us through how you thought about that from the front end? Because I think a lot of people, it's an afterthought. Oh, the cabin's renting. I should throw it up on Instagram as like another way to market it. I bet you were a bit more intentional than that.
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoy marketing, especially when I have free reign to do what I'd like to do with it. And so from the get-go, when we started renovating the A-frame, I was really made sure we had before and after photos so we could talk about the whole process, show those. I really wanted to engage people. I'm not a designer. I like designing things. But throughout the process, I'd be like, "What do you want to see here? Wood floors or this? Like carpet or wood
Mhm.
floors? Do you think we should paint? Should we not paint?" And so throughout the build process, I wanted to get people engaged and show them what it was like to be in the middle of a renovation, the unexpected that happens, like opening up a wall and finding that the wall is rotten or there's a spider web of electrical that needs to be replaced or whatever it was. But I also really wanted to have the community that was starting to follow us weigh in on the design choices we made and play a role in helping me make those choices. So from the get-go, it's always been for me a place to say like here is the up and here's what it's like to host, here's what it's like to renovate, here's like the struggles I am dealing with. What do you think? I like cultivating community on social media and talking about things that maybe we're not always talking about, and so we can share, be upfront and honest about. It's not just like get a property, make lots of money. There's nothing else that happens. Like there's a lot that happens, and I want people to talk about those things. So I think that for me, it's always just mostly been about building community, both from like the other host side and then also from people who are coming to stay, so they know it's a real person behind this, struggling sometimes, making choices as they go, and that's pretty much been my strategy from the start with the
Yeah.
A-frames social media.
And you also put your face on camera, which is so rare, I feel like, in the cabin world. And for me, is like such a deal maker. Like when you follow so many cabins, when someone puts their face on camera and you feel like you know them as a human, it just feels different. I feel
Yeah.
more invested in it. Was that intentional? Were you comfortable with that before? Was that like a marketing strategy decision?
No, I mean, I'm not comfortable. I'm not comfortable doing this, honestly. Like I'm such an introvert, but I think that this is exactly right. That's why I do it, is because I want people to know who I am. I'm not just it like social media is such a there's just such an illusion behind sometimes what's happening, and I've always felt like I need to be up front and be like, this is who I am. This is how the A-frame
Mhm.
came to be. Um this is it, me. So I do try to like put my face on there and make sure people know who their host is.
Yeah. Which even just from like an Instagram friend perspective, I loved hopping on this podcast and not feeling like it was a stranger. Like, nope, I know
Right.
exactly like who I'm chatting with. And that is not
Yeah.
always the case. And I think with a lot of accounts, some accounts I've messaged with for months and months and months. And I'm literally like, I don't know if I'm talking to the husband or the wife or like
Yes.
who is the human that I'm talking to. And that feels a little weird. Fine for
Hmm.
one message, but when you keep having conversations and you don't know who it is, it does start to feel like I don't know the right word for it, but it feels like very impersonal. And I don't remember them.
Yeah.
Honestly, like I often don't remember conversations we had previously if it's just with a house or a
Right.
cabin and not with a human. But there was a phase I went through where every time someone messaged me and I replied, I would say like, "I'm Janice, by the way." And only like 50% of the time would they respond with their name.
Oh,
The other
interesting.
50%, they'd be like, "Oh, it's nice to meet you, Janice." I'm like, "And you are?" Because even
Who
the name
who are you?
helps me. Yeah, who are you?
Yeah,
When you
totally.
look at other Instagram accounts as a marketing expert, what is
Mhm.
the biggest mistake you see cabin accounts making?
I think you just nailed it. It's not being personable enough. There's lots of pretty pictures of cabins all over Instagram. What makes you stand out? I think that's being more personable and you don't have to dive into being as, talking about the struggles like maybe I'm willing to do, but I think just being a real person behind the account is important. People aren't looking for perfection on social media. Um, I think like one thing that really stood out was when you posted something about here's how much something costs. I can't totally remember how much you spend on marketing per year of Cozy Rock. I think that's when I really was like, oh, who is this person? They are doing something that speaks to me because they're saying something that nobody's willing to say on here. They're talking about something that we all want to know, but we're like not sharing. So
Mhm.
I think that just being personable, you don't have to go into the great detail, um, but I think it helps to know who is behind the account that you're looking at. And so I think that's just a big thing. Feel like I'm too old to talk about like the trends of TikTok and Instagram at this point, but as long as I've been in marketing and doing social media, it's really about just being authentic and being yourself and being real, and that I don't think that's changed, and I don't think it's going to change for social media anytime soon.
Yeah, I saw something somewhere recently that said, like, it's called social networking for a reason. Don't forget the networking part. And I think about that a lot now. It's a totally different platform. But if I were to go to a networking event, I wouldn't like wear a mask so people couldn't see me. I would definitely like introduce myself with my name. I might not reveal like vulnerable parts of me, but I might
Right.
have like real conversations with people. And even just a couple small ways of like introducing the networking part, I think if anyone really reflects on their social experience, the accounts they feel most engaged with are probably the ones where there is an element of that human piece and not just like
Hmm.
tag who you'd stay here with,
Yes, that's
which you see
that's
all the time. And that's fine. That's a strategy. And I mean, some of these
totally.
accounts have hundreds of thousands of followers, so it must be working for them. But I don't feel personally invested in those accounts in the same way that I do accounts like yours, where I feel like I know the human. How do you keep it sustainable? I struggle with this a little bit. Not even just the posting, just the mental aspects of putting content out all the time, interacting with seeing content. How do you make it sustainable?
I mean, I struggle with this a bit, and it's the same reason that I feel like I need another cabin probably, where somebody's doing it every day, and maybe it's because I'm a little competitive, maybe it's because of whatever, but I feel like, oh, I should I be posting again? But I think the way that you are authentic and you show up is to post when you have something to say, or post
Yeah.
you don't it doesn't need to happen every day. So not comparing yourself to others on social media, which is forever the challenge probably for all of us, is one of those ways I think that helps me stay just not get burnt out. I also, of course, because I'm in this, I love it. Some days I don't want to write a caption and I'm just like, my caption is like one word and I'm like, all right, I'm all done. I can't. But this photo is pretty. Please check it out. But I'm willing to I'm willing to do that. But I also try to just post when I feel like posting and not putting pressure
Yeah.
on myself to do it all the time, so that it doesn't get just overwhelming and hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Post when you have something to say or when you're having a good hair day. One of the two, right? Like,
Yeah,
and then eventually you'll get enough posts out. I'm totally kidding. Anyone who follows me knows that I've shown up looking absolutely horrible 90% of the time. But that means when
same.
I am having a good hair day, I've got to show up just so people
I
know
know.
that occasionally I can pull it together.
Totally. I'm usually like just out, like had just gone from a run and my face is red and I'm like, you guys, look at this thing. And I promise sometimes I brush my hair.
Yep. I love that though, because I actually made the only rule I made for myself at the beginning was don't stop yourself from showing up because you don't have makeup on or didn't do your hair. Because I was like, no dude would ever do that. I follow tons of like guys on other accounts and like that doesn't stop any of them. So like I'm not gonna
Totally.
let that stop me. And if I did let it stop me, I would never show up on Instagram. It would be like once a month. And I
Truly,
know
yes.
that doesn't make sense. Yeah. Okay. One more marketing question. Is Instagram your only marketing tool? Because people always ask me what else we do for marketing, and you're an expert. So what else do you all do for marketing?
In the beginning, I spent a little more time working on trying to tell our story through PR and reaching out to media. I haven't had the bandwidth to do that. I have a website, I have an email. Our email has done absolutely nothing for us. I understand the value of it, but every time I send an email, I'm like, well, that was not worth my time. So I think it really depends on who your audience is and what's working for you. And I really feel like you should test things, but not do something because everyone says you should do it. Everyone's saying build your own email community so you're not relying on social media and you're not relying on um, Airbnb. But if that's not working, it's not working. I'm going to continue to build that and hope that at some point it kind of evolves. But right now, social media is the big thing for us. Instagram
Yeah.
is what's working. I use TikTok. I don't know if it's working. I don't. It's just kind of fun, and it's a good place for me to experiment with keeping up with the trends and things. But it's not. I really think Instagram's just the only thing that's working for us right now, besides being on Airbnb. So
Yeah.
that's that's the main one.
Can you give a little bit of insight when you say pitching to like media and the PR route? As someone who has no idea what that looks like, I'm guessing others
Yeah.
don't either. What does that look like? Do you have like a spreadsheet of publications that you wanted? What does a pitch email look like?
Yeah. I
Tell
mean,
me the basics.
well, because I've done a bit of that in work, it's a lot. It really is just pitching. It's like I will find folks that are writing articles that feel similar to what the story I'd like to be telling for a specific publication, and then I'll figure out how to contact them. Usually their email is like in the byline or something. And then I have sent emails saying, "Hi, I'm Whitney. We just did this thing. Here's why it's unique because um, they want to know why it's new, special, unique. You've got to have some kind of story. It can't just be like, I have a pretty cabin. Please tell my story."
Yeah.
So in the beginning, I wanted to share that we renovated it ourselves. I felt like I probably was just mostly proud of that, but I wanted to tell that story and show when we had the before and after. So that was kind of the angle that I took with like, here's the work that went into it. Here's if somebody else wants to do this, this is what it looks like, and trying to tell that story. So I mean, a lot of pitching is not hearing back, but if you do it,
Mhm.
somebody at some point will be interested, I think so. It's
That's
a
right.
lot of work, but it's another outlet for getting your name out there. So
That's right. When I ran a startup and we had to pitch to investors, someone in my cohort, and I love this strategy. He didn't count how much money he'd raised so far. He counted how many no's he got. And his goals were all around how many no's he wanted to get. Cause he's like, if I say I want to get 50 no's, I've got to pitch at least 50 people. If I want to get 100 no's, I've got to pitch 100 people. And then it kind of takes away some of the defeatism of, oh, I keep
hmm
getting no's. Well, great. I'm getting closer to my goal of 50 no's. And if I get 50 no's, then odds go up. There might be a yes in there, right? I just
yeah,
really like that
totally,
mindset shift, which I think could apply there too, because I do think it can get frustrating for folks and they give up.
totally.
Okay, I want to talk to you about the hosting side of it. You mentioned something in your pre-interview about experience hosting. Can you talk about what this looks like at your cabin and for your guests?
I think like the experience hosting that I feel like I'm a really inefficient host, which is also another reason why we don't have another cabin because I handwrite every single note. specific to why they're coming into town. I welcome every single person, even though I have an automated email. I still am like, "Hi, I'm Whitney, and thanks for choosing the A-frame." And I'm just I go out of my way to be personable, just like I am on social media, to say like I'm a real person. Welcome to the
Yeah.
A-frame. And so I think for me, that's like the first part of the experience, and then
You and Alexis from the Kingdom A-frame would be besties. Have you talked to her before?
I listened to hers and I was like, yes, thank you. I'm not the only one
She
that
does the
does
same
that.
thing. I love it. I mean, I can't do it, but I love it.
Well, it's not efficient, but I can't stop. I mean, even things like I know I could set my door codes to something random, but I'm just like, here's your phone number so you don't forget it and we don't have to let's make your life simple, and mine is a little,
Yeah.
let's just do it. So I think the experience starts with that for me for at the A-frame, and yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that's probably the thing that I feel like I do that makes their stay at the A-frame a little bit more unique than maybe
The other
usual.
Airbnbs that you stayed at. Because you're an avid
Yeah.
traveler, so I imagine that you had seen not even just Airbnbs, but also a lot of hotels, and all of that had to undoubtedly shape your experience of what you wanted your A-frame to be like. Are there any, like, takeaways or tidbits that you picked up from all your travels that were like, "We're definitely doing this," or "We're definitely not doing this"?
Yes, I think that I have shown up at in Croatia and Airbnb and they had local wine, and it doesn't need to be
Mm.
local wine, but I just love that something is local that you're getting. That I think that's great. So things like that I think have really made a difference to me. I've noticed in different countries they're more likely to meet you at the door and like show you around, and that's not something that I feel like makes sense. It's not even like a thing that I feel like people are doing in the US necessarily as much. So that isn't something that I plan on doing, but I like that that you're getting to know the host before you walk into their space and they're like, here's the layout.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I guess I've taken away from traveling a lot that those small things make a big difference. And so I'm constantly trying to just add a little bit of something. I'm always forgetting my toothbrush every time I travel. There was a toothbrush in the like there's spared things in the bathroom just because from traveling and not having those things, it's just so nice to just be like, here you are. Here's the thing that you might have forgotten. So just little details I think make a big difference. And I think I've really tried to take that away from most of my
Yeah.
traveling.
Yeah.
And pillows.
I
Please don't give me one pillow.
Oh my gosh. This is so funny because I reflected a lot on our cabin when I stayed at Little Mountain A-frame last weekend because I don't go to a lot of other cabins. And in her pantry, she had packets of ramen noodles and Reese's peanut butter cups. And on the counter, she had granola bars. And literally the first thing I thought when I saw them was like, this is wildly unsustainable. Not for the environment, but like, how is she going to keep this up? Because for
Yeah.
me, I'm just like, how do I keep this stocked on top of everything else? But I swear to God, we had a Reese's peanut butter cup every night. We
Yeah.
took granola bars on our hike because we hadn't gone grocery shopping. It was the only thing we ate on this like horribly difficult hike. And I was like, okay, these small details really made a difference for me. How do I figure out a way to do it?
Yes. In Bailey, where the A-frame is, there is a local baker, and when people are celebrating special occasions, she will
Mm.
drop off something for them. So that's really nice. It like takes it off me to figure out how to get there, but yeah, little things like that I try to do just to make people feel like I really do care that they stayed at the A-frame.
The debate that I see show up a lot on like, I don't know if you're in any Airbnb host Facebook groups. But
Yes.
okay, so you've probably seen this. But it feels like there's constantly a conversation around the five-star rating system and what it means for Airbnb and like that it's not like your traditional rating system and people don't understand it and that's why they got 4 stars. And I have to bite my tongue a lot cuz I'm like first of all, a five-star rating system is like pretty standard most places. And like Second of all, I don't think it's about people not understanding the rating system. I think it's about people not being completely satisfied with their stay. And I know that's like a super bummer to hear, and nobody wants a 4-star review. We all want 5-star reviews. But I wish we would spend more time reflecting on the small things that we can do that would make it a 5-star. And so, even to your point about people greeting you, when we were in Patagonia, our host greeted us and gave us a tour around the house. And it took a lot of time and kind of like interfered with our schedule for the day.
Hmm.
And honestly, we didn't have like a 5-star perfect stay. We ran out of toilet paper. There were a couple things. The pillows weren't great. But I had met her. I met the human who ran the space. She had taken the time to like show me around. She was a new host. And that in itself, 5 stars. I'm not giving you less than 5 stars. Like you are a good
Totally.
intentioned person doing your best, right? Granola bars in the cabin. I didn't go hungry on my hike. I don't care if anything else went wrong. I'm giving you 5 stars. And sometimes I wish the conversation were more about what are the little things that we can do that really go above and beyond so that if something goes wrong, it's not the end of the world and it doesn't, no one's taking a star off. I think really when we get
Yes.
4-star reviews, it's that we didn't feel paid attention to enough in the way that we want to.
Yeah, I think that's true. We've had one recently, and I'm always like, I take it way too personal, but it isn't, it just, you can't, even with all of that said, you cannot please everyone, and that is
That's
just
right.
life. So,
That's right.
accepting that even the little things don't always work, but they play a pretty big role, like you said, in making that choice between 5-star and not. So,
I find it hard to imagine that anyone gave you less than 5 stars when they have a personal handwritten note greeting them on their
thank you.
stay. To me, those are the things that matter. I just want to feel like you're taking my stay seriously, that this is not just like, whoop,
Hmm.
money got deposited into my bank account. Excellent. I want to feel like you care about my stay as much as I care about my stay. And I don't
Yeah.
think that's too much to ask when people are trusting you with their vacations. I think that's a big thing and it's not inexpensive. It's just I don't know. I think if you feel like they're taking your stay seriously and a handwritten note, man, I mean, I don't do it, so I must not be taking stays as seriously as you, but how could I give someone less than 4 stars if they had done that
No,
for me?
I don't think that's required. It's just I can't stop. It's just a thing I do. But I think also knowing the place that you have, if you want someone to feel special and they've booked your place, I don't think my place is for the amount of money people are spending to come stay, it is important to me that they feel like I appreciate that they stayed with us. It is,
Mhm.
if I had a smaller place that was just like, it's in the city, it's like near something, come stay if you want, the price makes sense for what it is. That's a whole different story, but that's not what the A-frame is for me. So I think it just
Yeah,
really varies too on what you're wanting to offer and what you're
that's right.
renting. So
That's right. I have thank you cards that I put in our gift boxes for my business, not for my Airbnb. And they say on the front, abundance begins with gratitude. And I think about that so much of how far it can go to just say to someone, thank you for choosing me. I
mhm.
know that you have other choices and you picked us, and I'm grateful for that. And I'm not always sure that I say that enough in enough places. So I like having that reminder to just, and I don't know that I've ever used those words in a message to guests. I'm like, thanks for coming. I hope we can host you again. But even that feels kind of self-centered. I hope we can host you again instead of thank you for choosing us, like that just it feels different. I think that's beautiful.
Thanks.
Okay, so talk to me about the cabin culture at your place. In your pre-interview, you mentioned that cabin culture feels playful and nostalgic. I've never heard it described that way, and I love it feels so accurate despite never having had those words. Tell me more about where you got that from and what the cabin culture is like at your place.
Yeah, I mean, that is what I hope. There's something about an A-frame that's nostalgic. There's my dad who passed away. His skis are in there. You see lots of like
Mhm.
old skis and things in cabins, and that has that nostalgic vibe. We did a bit of like the mid-century remodel, so there's like some antiques and things that are in there, but then playful because besides that, an A-frame like a rectangle in the woods feels playful to me. I think that people are just there's less restrictions than your own house. So people are willing to
Yeah.
just bring some of their flair and their personality into their cabin and it's just more creative. I mean, I love looking at like new renovations, old cabins that are updated, old cabins, I don't care. I love the like quirky flares and that they have. And so I just think that yeah, cabins are just more playful and have more of whoever built them or renovated them, their personality. And even like the things that we designed in there are meant to just be a little bit more fun than probably like staying. I want people to enjoy the space and feel like it was a playful design, not just like we take ourselves super seriously. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, I don't know. I think that's what I love most about cabins is they're quirky and they're fun and people put their personality into them. And even if it's really creative and modern, it's still something that you're not that is different than a lot of people's just like everyday house that they live in.
Yeah, that's such a good point. When it is your second house, there is an element of like, I don't need to take this so seriously. I don't need to, I don't know. I can be a bit more whimsical in what I'm
Yeah.
like decorating with or putting in there. What is your most favorite whimsical touch in your cabin?
Well, I think that I am like if you can see from behind me that my house is very like white and gray. And when we renovated this house, there was not a lot of color. So for me, it doesn't take much to feel like, oh, look at me being creative or playful. But I mean, just having like a fun backsplash in a bright blue velvet couch, those things feel playful to me in a way that like in my own house, it's just like a gray couch, gray walls, some wood, like
Yeah.
it's things like that that and then just like the books that we have in there and just little details that I hope people find that are playful as well. But
Yeah. Okay, before we get to our hot topics, I want to ask a couple more questions about the cabin culture at your cabin.
sure.
Um, so let's start with what are the most common drinks when you show up to the cabin? What is your favorite thing to drink at the cabin?
Mm, I like an Aperol spritz.
Mm.
There's also or like a hard kombucha.
Mm.
Those are probably my favorite. And then yeah, like some hot tea before bed. Those are my favorites.
Yeah, hot tea is a good one at night. It's always like a drink. I always have like a champagne cocktail because we keep champagne in our closet for whenever
Yeah.
anyone's celebrating something, we'll put it in the fridge. But that means there's a healthy stock of champagne when we show up. So always like that. But before bed, we have these really good hot tea that just feels like a nice way to like wind down.
Yeah,
What about the
totally.
most common meal that you cook?
Mm. Well, seeing as I never cook and it's fully my husband who's the cook, but I still feel like we do a lot of just like throw things together, like a grain bowl with a bunch of vegetables or like tacos or something that's just like a whatever we have in the fridge that we brought to the A-frame that we can make. But we don't really have like a specific meal that we make when we go there, I don't think.
Because it's so close to your home, do you find it hard to make time for you to go there and block off days for your time? Or is that easier because it's so close to home? So if there's a last minute opening, you can just be like, you know what? We're going to go take it.
Yeah, I try to just I mostly do it out of feeling like we need to every like 3 months or so just to make sure that I want to spend time there for sure, but also things just start to wear down and I don't always know about it unless I'm there and I'm experiencing it. So I feel like I just kind of plan ahead and try to find some time. And we don't actually end up going there last minute. Usually I'm just like, whatever, it's quiet, it's fine. Let's just leave it be. And we try to book like a little bit longer time where I can work from there. It's worth bringing all of our things up and
Yeah.
making it a whole process. So,
Yeah. Okay. Let's go to the hot topics. I'm going to start with the first one, which is what makes a cabin, but also as an A-frame owner, this has become of particular interest to me, especially after having stayed at an A-frame. Are
yes.
all A-frames cabins, or is that a completely different category?
Hmm. I don't
Because I've
know. I
lumped them
get
right in.
I think it's a
I mean,
cabin. Yeah, I mean, I think it's like kind of an original besides log cabin. I feel like an A-frame is kind of the old school cabin. So, yeah.
yeah. So what else would you say is criteria to make something a cabin?
Mm, I don't know. I guess maybe for me anyway, it's being in the woods. Like if it's just in a subdivision and it's a cabin, that feels to me like less cabin than just like a place in rural area that feels more like secluded and peaceful. There's something about a cabin to me that I need to, even if I have neighbors, I need it to feel like I am in the woods living the cozy life, but like in a cabin. So I don't know.
The cozy life.
That's not really the like an answer that is accurate, but that's I guess what I feel like about cabins. So
Oh, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer or an accurate or inaccurate answer. I'm just always curious because I don't have a good answer for it. So I'm just kind of pooling the audience. But in the meantime, I am developing my own visual diagram to really break
yes.
down the differences here. Okay, what about cabin fashion? A question we have not touched on in many episodes. But when you think about cabin fashion, what does your cabin fashion look like?
Oh, I feel like I'm real basic about it, like sweatshirt, wool socks, slippers, leggings, beanie, like just all the things that are cozy. I have like a cozy blanket in every room. Like, yeah, I'm not dressed up. I am wearing like giant the most comfortable item I have in it. I just like want everything to feel cozy, including what I'm wearing.
You're just living the cozy life over there.
So, yeah.
I'm gonna start saying that at home. I really like that because I do feel like that is like my number one priority at all times. Am I
Totally.
cozy enough? Okay. Cancellation policy. Talk to me about yours and how you came to that decision. This is a very hot topic.
I adjust it occasionally based on the season because as we know in the winter, people are getting sick and canceling more, and so that's when we see cancellations happening the most. I really try to be flexible. I think I'm kind of in the moderate range. I haven't even checked in a while, which for Airbnb still feels flexible to me, but so I try to just work with I try to be strict about that, but I also if it's last minute and I have a guest that's communicating and being really respectful. I will also really try to work with them to book it and then give them a refund. So that's one of those things where I'm in a different place than my husband on what we should be doing in that situation. But
Yeah,
I'm honestly pretty flexible about cancellations. It's just I get it, even though I really wish people would take advantage of insurance and
agree.
trip insurance. So
I will say my stance became a lot more hardline when Airbnb offered insurance at checkout. Because
yeah,
then I felt like you're making the choice to not pay for the insurance, and now you're asking me to be your insurance for free. And that was
right.
the moment where I was like, okay, like it was different before then, where there was travel insurance, but it wasn't quite always easy to get or easy to use. But now that Airbnb offers it, I'm kind of like, okay, I think I'm done with exceptions.
Yeah, totally.
Because
I'm trying to
it
get
can
better
get
at
out of
that.
control. Yeah. Well, I now say that. I say it upon like our initial message that's automated says something about weather that we don't do cancellations due to weather, but if that's of a concern to you, make sure you're adding on the Airbnb insurance. So then they've heard that that exists, and then if they ask
Yeah.
for a flexible, I just say like, hey, like I don't know if you knew this, but Airbnb has an insurance option. If you selected that, definitely reach out to them. I bet this is covered, and then I don't hear from them
Yeah.
again. Because if they
I think
didn't
that's
select it, then I don't know what to tell them.
yeah, I think that's really smart. I do kind of have language like that in the listing, which I'm not convinced gets read, but I think that I do try to keep that like be pretty upfront about that from the start, but it still hasn't fully. I
Yeah, it's
still
so
have
hard.
to, yeah.
It's
But
so
I do
hard. And
try to
even
stay
when
consistent also.
well, that's the hard part for me. I was making exceptions for a while, and then there were times where I'm like, I'm not sure I believe that this is like actually what's going on, and it's really hard. And I was like, you
Hmm.
know what? I don't feel comfortable being the judge of who's telling the truth and who's not. And I don't know if this is my Enneagram 8 wing, but fairness just feels so important. So I'm just
Yeah.
like, I don't know that I trust myself to read through the lines and know what's really going on here.
I think
What
that's
about
part of what's changing my mind from just always being flexible to being like, all right, there's other options. It doesn't have to be on me. So, yeah.
yeah, yeah, and especially now, I mean, I'm very grateful that Airbnb added that. I think it's great for guests, and I also think it's great for hosts to be able to be
Hmm.
like, "Okay, it's not my responsibility anymore," thankfully, because that's hard. That's a hard position
Yeah.
to be in because we are operating as businesses, but we're very small businesses and often just individuals,
Hmm.
and that's really hard. What about I haven't asked this one in a while. What about labels in a cabin?
We have a few. I don't love labels, but I also like making people's life easy. So there's a few that says like which light goes to which when you first walk in, so people aren't like looking for light bulbs in the house. Like I've got a few, but I'm not labeling like here's where the cups go, here's where the forks go. Whatever. But
Yeah.
yeah, if I think it's gonna help somebody figure something out quickly, then I'll label a few things. Or if we've just
Yeah.
had too many questions, I'm like, all
Yep.
right, this is obviously not clear. So
Yeah. Yeah. That's really smart. I feel like when I was a teacher, we would always say, if they're not learning, you're not teaching, which I always
Mhm.
thought was like a really good reframe of, okay, if they're asking these questions a lot at the cabin, then I have done something wrong as the host to not make it clear for them. So I
Yeah,
think that's a really good point. And I was at an A-frame, and the lighting in an A-frame is very different than lighting in a cabin because you have those high ceilings. So it's not like super instinctive which switch goes to what. And I was so
totally.
grateful for the labels on the lights. It made my life so much easier.
Totally.
Okay, last one, pet friendly.
We're not. And I have a pet, and I don't know. I'm pretty hard, like hardline no for the A-frame. If I ever did this again, I would consider it because I get it, but we're not pet friendly,
What's
and that won't be
the
changing.
Yeah, what stops you at this one?
Um, I I think I'm too attached to this cabin, and I feel like that's just another thing. There's a few other like more realistic things like we usually have back-to-back listings, and I don't want to give our cleaners anything else to clean. They already
Yeah.
I just want to be able to get in and get out and do what they need to do and clean, and I don't want to deal with the dog hair and potential stains and things that could just like take their clean to like another hour or two. There's just not usually enough time for that for the A-frame. So that's one of them. I'm sure that's like just partially an excuse, but that's kind of the thing that I've been reluctant the most about. So
Yeah, but it's also your house. You get to make that decision. And just because,
true.
to be clear, just because we're pet friendly doesn't mean like I feel like everyone needs to be. My twin sister's allergic and she will not stay at places that are pet friendly. So I think it is such a personal decision. Um, and I think the cleaning one is a real one. There's so many things to do in a short period of time. And we have so many same day flips that I worry about that too.
Mhm.
If anyone, knock on wood, ever left it in really bad shape, there would be like, where is our buffer?
Yeah,
Like an hour maybe of a buffer. And so that's really
totally.
hard. Whitney, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, it was awesome. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us. And if you liked what you heard, feel free to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or share some of your favorite parts over on Apple Podcasts in review. If you have feedback or suggestions for the future, you can find us on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin and The Chalet Frame, spelled The Chalet, CHALA Frame. Looking forward to next week.